I think the companies that are actually solving problems are going to stick around and do really, really well. And I think that creators are becoming small business owners and business owners are having to become creators now.
Today, I'm joined by Natalie Barbu, a content creator, podcast host, and CEO of Rella, a software business created to be the ultimate project management assistant for creators.
I didn't start Rella because I was like, oh, now it's a good time to start a creator business. Like, I did not know what the term creator economy was. I came up with the idea for Rella based on all my previous experiences of being a creator myself, helping other creators, and then seeing creators work with brands. I just knew there needed to be something better out there and something easier for us.
In this episode, we discuss the unique challenges of starting a software business in the creator economy, overcoming the fear of criticism that comes with building in public, and how to build a strong team with complementary skills and a shared passion.
I think the cringe is still there. Like, so many people you'll hear be like, oh my God, she's trying to be an influencer, like eye roll. It's cringy until you make it. A big thing is making sure you like the people you're working with and that you have complementary skill sets. I think content is like everything right now, and that's just going to continue. I think there's going to be a lot of good businesses that come out of it that are trying to capture that market, which is creators that are earning revenue and becoming business owners, or vice versa, because that is where the money is, and there is so much money in it.
Thanks for being here, Natalie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been really excited to have you on and chat with you because you're one of the very few creators I can think of, a very short list of creators who have taken the hard path and built a SaaS business. I can think of a lot of creators who have built CPG businesses, but not software businesses.
Yeah.
So I'd love to explore that with you a bit.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. And there's not too many of us out there.
What's your background? How'd you get started in this creator economy thing?
Yeah, so I actually started on YouTube in 2011. So very long time ago, early days of YouTube before even Instagram. Like, I had my YouTube channel before I had my Instagram account. And I started because I was just bored one day and was watching other creators that were around my age filming in their bedrooms. And I was like, I could do this. Like, this looks fun. So filmed with my laptop and then did it throughout high school, went to college. In college, I always thought I was going to do something a bit more technical, though. So I did get my degree in industrial engineering and then moved on to work at a consulting company. So at that point, I was already doing social media for like 7 or 8 years, and I still didn't do it full time. It was purely a hobby. And earlier days was definitely harder to do it full time, I think. Like, people weren't really quitting their jobs in 2011, 2012. But for me, I always felt like my growth was so slow and steady, and I was very fine with this just being like a side hustle for the rest of my life because I didn't know if I could ever get it to a point where I could do it full time. But 9 months after I started my job at Accenture, I ended up quitting because I ended up making double my salary on social media than I was at Accenture.
Wow.
So decided to quit to do that. And then was coaching creators one-on-one, helping them grow. I was doing freelance for brands where I was doing influencer marketing for them and connecting them with creators and working on their social media strategy. And then I came up with the idea for Rella based on all my previous experiences of, being a creator myself, helping other creators, and then seeing creators work with brands and seeing their process. I just knew there needed to be something better out there and something easier for us. And so that's why I came up with the idea for Rella, started that, and have been doing that ever since.
So you said you started around 2011, 2012. Was there any point in that journey where it became obvious to you like the creator economy was going to be a big thing?
Not in 2011 when I first started. I had no clue. And I remember it was weird. Like, it was a weird thing for me to do. I got made fun of in high school for doing it.
Yeah.
But I will say that I always knew social media was a platform, even at that time, because a platform to like get me to wherever I needed to be, because I knew that I was one of the only people doing it, especially at that time. No one was doing it. So I thought I had this unique edge. And I was always someone that was very ambitious and always wanted to like apply and see if I got something or, tried new things. And so I remember when in 2012, 17 magazine, which at the time was huge for girls my age. And they were having a style council application, which meant that you were able to join this exclusive like style council. They were picking 5 girls. You were going to be in 5 different issues throughout the year of 2012. they would fly you to New York, do photo shoots. Like it was super cool. And I remember thinking like, okay, I know I have my YouTube channel. I had like a fashion Tumblr at that point also.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm going to apply and see if I get it. And I ended up getting it. And that's when I knew, like, I know the only reason why I got this was because of my YouTube channel and my blog. And so it
It
opened my
opened, yeah.
eyes.
So besides the fact that you made double your Accenture salary or whatever it was, it sounds like it opened a ton of doors for you. You got other jobs or opportunities that you would have had otherwise.
Totally. I mean, I even think Accenture has nothing to do with social media, but I think I got that job because of that too. Because in the job interview, I talked about my social media for the entire time, which I know some people are like, oh, I don't want to tell my employer. I don't want to share that I'm doing that because it's not relevant, or they might, think that I'm not going to take their job seriously. But we learn so many skills being creators, and it's something so unique that majority of people don't can't say that they do. We've worked, I mean, I at the time was working with so many brands. I was making revenue. It was such a selling point for me to in my even Accenture interview. So I
Sure.
just knew that it opened up so many doors, and that's why I was fine with never doing it full time and never making enough money to do it full time, because I knew that one, I loved it, and two, the platform and the opportunities it brought, I already saw it at like a very young age at how many doors it could
When you
open.
started, so 2011, 2012, how did you get over the cringe early on, or the haters? I think you
Yeah,
mentioned that maybe the cringe is lessened a bit, right? As social media and being an influencer has become more of like a real career path. Early
totally. But
on, I remember that stage.
yeah. And I think the cringe is still there. Like so many people, I mean, you'll hear be like, "Oh my god, she's trying to be an influencer," like eye roll. It's
Right.
cringy until you make it. So unfortunately, I think that does still exist. I think it's better now than before, but I didn't tell anyone at my high school that I was doing this. So like I did not share it until I got to college. People found out, so that's how it became a thing, because some people found my YouTube videos and I would text them and say like, "Please don't tell anyone about this. Like I don't want this to get out." And obviously they did. And so it wasn't like it was like high school wide, but it was enough where certain groups of people would make fun of me for it. And
Yeah.
so it was enough to make me feel really embarrassed. But again, I saw the opportunities it brought, and I saw that, I really loved it. Like I had a lot of fun doing it. Like it was a really good
Yeah.
creative outlet for me. And so I kind of just tried to not care, but it definitely took a toll. Like I would second guess the videos I would do. I feel like I wasn't, probably the most creative I could have
Mm.
been, wasn't as consistent, because I was definitely scared of people making fun of me and
Yeah. I mean, I
finding
can
those
relate to that
videos.
feeling, even with this podcast itself. I would not necessarily self-identify as a very creative person.
Mhm.
And so I definitely felt that cringe early on. But there's kind of a hump you get over, right? And then it gets better, I think, as you get some traction and you gain a little confidence.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember going to college and thinking, we're 18, like we're adults now, and thinking, if people care about what I'm doing with my life at 18 and you're an adult, like you're pathetic, and I just like started channeling that, where it looks worse on you if you make fun of me and you care about what I'm doing
Sure.
than what I'm doing.
Why did you start a software business?
It was just a problem that I had. Like I've always been someone that looks at problems, like tries to find, if I feel a pain point, if I feel an frustration and annoyance, I always think like, okay, how can I fix this? Like I'll look up solutions, I'll think about how to fix it. And I've always been like that. Like I've always thought, okay, there's got to be another way for this, and I've tried to like find solutions for things. So when I was a creator, once I started making money, I was so annoyed at the process of managing brand deals. Like I
Mm,
first was managing them on my phone, on my notes app, which is like so not good. Then I was moved on to a spreadsheet. Then I moved on to project management tools. Then I kind of used a bunch of those things in combination. Then things were getting lost in my email. And it was just like so many different tools that I was using on top of planning my content across all the platforms I was on. Because I had YouTube, TikTok, or at the time I didn't have TikTok, but like YouTube, Instagram,
sure.
podcasts. Like I had all of those things, and I was like, this is so hard to manage. And I even had a manager. Like I even had someone helping me with it, and I just was frustrated with what I was using. And so I tried to look up videos of what other people were doing, and I would copy them. I would like do their Notion templates, or I would copy their process. But I always had like 5 apps open at the same time, and I just didn't like that. Like I thought that there needed to be something better. And I had looked at other industries and I saw like even, in the freelance world, there's Honeybook. Like Honeybook is great for managing your clients and managing
Sure.
projects. And I viewed what I was doing as managing clients, like a
Mm.
brand deal as a client. And there wasn't something out there like for people like us that were doing that and specifically on social media. So that's why I was like, okay, I'm going to build it. Like this can't be that hard. Like in my mind, this was a project. Like this was when I first had the idea, I thought I could pay a developer $10,000, build this app and it would run and be fine. And I could
Okay.
sell it for $5 a month. Like I thought this was going to be something like a little project I
It sounds
could
like the
do.
scope started a lot smaller and the expectations about how difficult it would be were maybe lower than reality.
100%. Yeah. The scope started out as actually just a content planner, a place to like plan your content and like plan your sponsorships. And then it elevated to like, oh, the real pain point is like managing all of these things. Let's have a campaign tracker. Let's have the content and
Yeah.
the revenue connect. Like it's definitely expanded since the beginning.
I assume you're a capitalist. And what I mean by that is like you're in this, you want to make money and build a real business and generate equity value for yourself, I
Yeah.
assume.
hmm
And so to play devil's advocate, like why not take the path that a lot of other creators took, which is just keep creating content, create more of it, do a bigger and bigger audience, sell more ads.
hmm
Why
Yeah.
not go that route?
So I always wanted to start something else. Like even when I quit my job, I started freelancing. I started coaching one-on-one with creators. Even though I was making way more money doing brand deals, I just always knew that I wouldn't be totally fulfilled if I
Mm,
just did that because I've had this like itch to start something. I have like a problem solver mentality. And so I always knew I would start something eventually. I just didn't know what it was. And I didn't want to start a business just for the sake of starting a business because I've done that in the past. I started like an online clothing store and it
okay.
was just purely because I wanted to start something. It was not a passion of mine. It wasn't, I didn't really love it. So that didn't end up going anywhere. But I always knew that I was going to do something else. So that was one thing. But I definitely did not know how hard it would be. Like I always say,
It's
if I
hard. Yeah. And you've got to be really obsessed with, you have to be really obsessed with the problem that you're solving, right? Otherwise it's so
Mhm,
hard. It's just ends up not being worth it 50% of the time.
exactly. Yeah. So thankfully, I was like very obsessed with this. I've been in the creator world for a very long time. I've spoken with hundreds of creators. I've worked with hundreds of brands. So I really know the industry, I think, better than majority of people do just for being in it for so long and having my hand in so many different areas of it.
And there's
But
something to be said for like being the customer yourself, which you were, and
mhm.
trying to solve your own problems, not somebody else, not some other abstract idea of a customer's problems.
Yeah, which I think a lot of creator economy companies were doing. And, especially when it was very hyped up 2 years ago, 3 years ago, especially in like the venture space when people were, raising money for these creator startups. And now we're seeing that they haven't worked out as well. I think it's because a lot of people viewed it as like a shiny word and a shiny industry they could just plug into their pitch deck. They could target as customers. But so many of the founders were either not creators, so they were relying totally on other people's experiences. And so they didn't get like the tiny nuances. And creators are very specific where if it does not like fit your specific need, they're going to use something else. So you have to be aware of the nuances. Like even for us with like our content planner. It's a content planner, but we sync to Google Calendar. That's such a small thing. It's not technically challenging. It's so easy to do. But I know that creators use Google Calendar, and I'm not trying to completely pull them away from everything they're doing. I really want to integrate with their life already. So, like, that's something that's a huge selling point, even though it's not like technically hard. But I just know
Yeah.
that
But it comes from
little,
you being very close to the customer and presumably getting the feedback and then channeling that into your product roadmap to build something that works.
exactly. Yep. So I'm very much in the middle of like the product, the marketing, the dev, like everything.
Yeah. I've I've personally started a couple businesses. Some of them have gone well, some of them haven't. I'd say the ones that didn't go well probably outnumbered the ones that did go well, which I think is most people's experience.
Yeah.
What would you do? As you reflect back on your own, so you started a fashion business, kind of like an online fashion store, and then the software business. You reflect back on both those experiences, maybe Rella in particular. What would you have done differently?
Hmm.
Is there anything that you can pinpoint that, like, hindsight's 2020, right? You would have started things in a different way.
Yeah, I think for the clothing store, I honestly, I mean, it did teach me a lot. So I guess I wouldn't say I shouldn't have started it, but I wasn't solving any problem. Like I was
Mm.
just, oh, I want to start this. Let me try. Like I wasn't doing anything unique. I was buying wholesale. Like it wasn't anything special at all. So I think that find a way to differentiate yourself, I think is
That
the
was kind of
biggest thing.
commoditized, undifferentiated. Sure.
Yes. Yeah, so that was a mistake there. With Rella, I mean, there's so many things I wish we would have done earlier, and it's comes with being first-time founders, like, we are learning as we go, but one of the biggest things is revenue earlier on. We were in the mindset of, "Oh, we just wanna get users on, we wanna test this," and I was so scared to charge people because I
Hmm.
was like, "Wait, the product's not perfect yet." So, like, we can't charge people. We're still using, this is a test, whatever. We should have started charging a lot earlier. Like you should
Interesting.
start charging as soon as possible because you will know if people want your product, if people like it, and if they're willing to pay. And if someone's never willing to pay, unless it's like a social media platform where you're going to rely on ads and all of that, but like for us, it wasn't, then you don't have a good business. So like now we're seeing people's willingness to pay and it's there. Like we're growing month over month. People are paying, people are signing up for subscriptions. Our attention is good. But if we would have done that earlier, I'm always like, damn, where would we have been now? So I really
Yeah.
do regret that.
Yeah. And hindsight is always 2020. Anytime anybody asks me like what I would have done differently, I'm like, how much time do you have? I'll give
Yeah.
you a list of 100 things.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's the benefit of, having a lot of, not as successful companies under your belt because you can then do something better the next time around. Whereas for us, I've been really proud of our team. Like we've been very lean and scrappy, but that's definitely
Yeah.
something that I wish we would have done.
Yeah. So how did you go about building out the team when you
Yeah.
first started? I imagine there's a bunch of skill sets and disciplines that you had to bring in to make this thing work.
So when I first had the idea, I knew that I needed someone to help me develop it. But I thought, again, this was a project in my eyes. I didn't view it as a company in the very beginning until I started talking to people. And so I knew I needed someone technical. So I started looking on Fiverr, Upwork, all of these like freelance sites. And I would talk to people from other countries and I just didn't feel like they connected with the product. Like they really didn't care about what I was building. It was like, okay, here's how much it's going to cost. Sure, I can build this. But it was just again going to be a project I passed off to them. And I started feeling like, this doesn't feel right. Like I don't necessarily know if this is actually just going to be a project. Like
Mm.
maybe this actually could be something bigger. So then I started asking friends if they knew anyone that could help me build this. Because again, I was in engineering and the school I went to was NC State, big engineering school. I knew there was someone there that knew how to do this. So I would ask any of my friends. I was going to like ask professors and, reach back into my network. And at the time I was already graduated. So I wasn't like in school, but I had a friend who had introduced me to these two guys that started a software business where they were already developing apps for other startups.
Oh,
And
very cool.
so, yeah, I had talked to them. We started working together. I was paying them at first. They weren't co-founders right away. And then they came on as co-founders. They left their software consultancy, came on full time. And that's how we started the team. And then they, at their software consultancy, they had a designer and an additional developer there. So we brought those people on as like our first developer and designer, and that's the entire team today.
How
So
did you convince them, or how did you get these two people excited enough to join the
mhm.
team as technical co-founders?
It was really it honestly didn't take much because we both really loved working together. So I loved working with them from even just like paying them and working together. They were looking for a company to become co founders for eventually. They didn't know when it would be, but they kind of started the software consultancy in hopes of actually joining a startup. So they were like doing little projects for startups. And they felt like when we worked together, they really loved what I was doing. They saw the potential. They obviously knew about the creator economy and social media just in general, and they knew how big it could be. And we just worked really well together. Like I think that's a big thing is making sure you like the people you're working with and that
Yeah.
you
You
have
got to have some
complementary skill
rapport. You have to
sets.
have some, um, yeah, what was it for you what was it about the work styles or the personalities that like really, how did you decide, hey, this is a fit?
Yeah, I think in the beginning they were very transparent, which I really appreciated. I felt like a lot of the contractors that I was talking to in other countries and on Fiverr, Upwork, like all of these that I had no references, like I was just like finding them online. Um, I felt like they were very like, okay, it's going to cost this much money. In 2 months, it'll be done. And I knew I was like, there's no way that they know how long it's going to take exactly, and that they like it's going to be more like I just knew that it wasn't going to be perfect with what they were saying because I just felt like with dev and with,
Sure.
an app, things take longer
How
than
could
you
you
think.
possibly know? Yeah. How could you
Yeah,
predict?
and the scope of work I was giving them wasn't the most detailed and fleshed out. So I was like, they're being too like quick with their answers, honestly. And when I talked to these guys, they were very like, this is my estimate, but like it'll probably take longer just because that's how these
Yeah.
things work. And, we'll bill by, the week and this is how much it's gonna be. But just so you know, we can't give you like a definite answer because we don't know how long it's going to take. We got to flesh this out a lot more. They were asking so many questions. They were just so like in depth about it that I felt like they already really cared from the beginning and felt like they were they were asking me questions that I didn't think of. That I was like, oh
Sure.
crap. Like, yeah, I guess I
Yeah.
do got to
It's
think
amazing
about
how
this.
often co-founder relationships just come back to like transparency, communication, and trust.
Hmm.
The skills have to be there as sort of they're table stakes, but
Yeah,
it's the other soft stuff that matters a lot.
because we're all learning as we go. Like they might not be the number one developers when I first found them, like they weren't like worked at the top startups and ex Google, Facebook, whatever, but they had such like a drive and like such a hustle and they were self learners also. And I really liked that. And then we really liked each other. Like we just got along really well. And so that matters so much because now we spend, I talk to them more than I talk to anyone. I spend hours of my life every week with them. And you have to be able to be like very to the point. Like we don't have like the niceties anymore of like, hi, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Blah, blah.
Right.
It's like, hey, can we get this done? It's
Right.
just
You've crossed that boundary into full comfort zone, and now it's straight to the point.
yes. Yeah, you have to get very comfortable with them.
You mentioned like you're kind of all learning together and growing. And there's something I want to go back to that you said earlier. You mentioned that your expectations for this, you thought this would be way easier than it actually was. So like, what are some of the hardest things that you encountered that you never expected that you would encounter as a
Mhm.
CEO of a software business?
There's so many different things, but I think having context switching all the time is
Mm,
really hard. So I am on the business side of it. I'm not technical. So I am constantly having to think about the product, think about our customers, customer service, marketing, content, along with my own content that I still do. So, and now we're fundraising. So now add another context switch of fundraising and making sure we have enough money. And okay, how much money are we making every month? How do we get these numbers up? Okay, how the numbers have to go up because of marketing. Well, we don't have a
sure.
marketing budget. So let's get creative. How are we going to market this? Okay, we have to push out content every week. Okay, so then I'm the one filming the content. So how do I like plan out this content and get it? Like how much piece of content do I have to make? So, and then setting time to film it and then meetings on top of that and networking. And it's so much context switching
Yeah.
that it can be very overwhelming because you have to do all of them in order for your business to be successful.
Yeah.
Like you
How
can't
do you
slack.
prioritize them? How do you decide in what order you're going to do them and what's most important?
Yeah, I usually do it just based on priorities of that week. Like what needs to get done. Like right now, fundraising is a big priority. So fundraising is one of the things that I focus on. But at the same time, we're not going to be able to fundraise if our revenue isn't consistently growing. So I
Sure.
can't completely neglect that either. So I try to balance the two with like, okay, half my day will be spent on fundraising, half my day will be spent on content, marketing, that type of stuff. And then I have delegated some things, obviously, to like our team, where I'm
Do
not
you have any
necessarily
coaches or mentors that you can talk to about some of these things?
Yeah, I actually had one coach that reached out to me on Instagram and she was helping me. She still is. We talk like every other week. And it's been really helpful just for her to help like with priorities, with mindset, with just like it's I mean, she's not a therapist, but even like mental health wise, like just like talking about things and
Yeah.
things that I'm struggling with. And it's really helpful because I think sometimes you can feel like you're drowning and you're in this alone and no one really gets it. Like I don't have
It's a
many
really
founder
lonely job being a
friends.
CEO, isn't it?
It is because I don't have founder friends. That's why also co-founders are
Mm.
so important because we are the only people that like understand what we're going through. Like no one else, even other founders, like they understand obviously, but they have their own issues with their own companies. Like I don't understand all of their company issues and they don't
Yeah.
understand what we're dealing with at Rella. So your co-founders are the only ones that get exactly what you're doing and going through.
Are there any places you, as a CEO, are there any places you go and look for content to learn about how to be a CEO, or I don't know, any books that you've read that have helped you on your journey?
So many. Yeah. I love podcasts with other founders. I think it's always comforting because half the time the battle is thinking, oh my gosh, like no one else gets this. Or, you look at other companies and you're like, dang, like I wish our company was at that point, or that successful. Or I doubt that they ever dealt with the stuff we're going through. And then when you hear about the founder stories and all the stuff that they dealt with, you're like, oh, that gives me hope because that means
Yeah.
that we can
It's
eventually
nice to
get
hear
to
that they
that
were
point.
in the same position at some point in the stages that
Yeah.
you're in.
So podcasts, I like the in-depth podcast. It's by First Round Capital.
Okay.
I don't think it's a popular podcast, but it is so good. It's so practical with like very specific problems founders are going through. So I love that. I like very specific things. Like I don't like a lot of fluff.
Mm.
Like oh, let's talk about your founder journey, and it's like very surface level because that doesn't really do anything for me. Like it's inspiring, sure,
Yeah,
but
you're
like
there to learn. You want to know, hey,
yeah.
what are the real problems that you've needed to overcome, and how exactly did you do it?
Yeah. So the in-depth podcast is great. And then the one book that I read that I would really recommend is called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution.
Mm.
And it's by the founder of Waze. I forget his name. Yuri something, I think.
Okay.
But it's the best book I've ever read as a founder in terms of like being inspirational enough to, be a good book, but also
Yeah.
being very dense with, educational content.
And I imagine that there's probably some other creators and CEOs that might look up to you. I mean, you're doing a lot of building in public. You've been pretty transparent about your work.
Yeah.
Why'd you decide to do that?
I've always been very transparent and I have always posted content that I want to see. So like I was looking for CEO founder content and I couldn't find any besides like there were some that were like mainly guys, doing their like 5 a.m. morning routine to be productive and your best self and whatever. And I was like, that's just so unrealistic and that's not me and that will never be me. So I wanted content that again was educational and walked you through the process as we were doing it, not in 5 years when I could reflect and make it glossy and, make it sound better. Like it was like in the moment. And I knew that there were other people like me. There's other female CEOs, there's other CEOs and founders in general that want to be at least founders, that they're searching for content and there's nothing. And then it kind of makes you feel like you can't do it. Because if there's no content out there, you feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it because no one else has done this before.
Yeah. I love the building in public idea. I've had it's a topic that comes up, I think, a lot with different CEOs of different backgrounds, whether content creators or not. And the thing I hear over and over from folks is that they're worried about looking bad when they share their mistakes, or sometimes they're concerned about like giving away too much confidential information that might allow a competitor to compete with them. How'd you get over those hurdles? I guess creating the content thing is probably pretty easy for you because you've been doing it for 10 years. Maybe as you said, your cringe factor is lower.
Definitely. So that wasn't an issue, but definitely the feeling like, oh gosh, like especially because we were raising money and we are raising money, how are investors going to see it if I talk about struggles, or how are our customers not going to have faith in us if I talk about, the hardships. So definitely that. And even like my co-founder has DM'd me before, like if I post something and it's like,
Are
I
you sure you
feel,
wanted to share that?
yeah, he'll be like, hey, I think you should delete that because it's doesn't make us sound confident. And sometimes I'm like, I understand, but also I'm not saying like we're failing, like, oh my God, like there's not,
Right.
it's not like I think that or I feel that way. It's more of just like the mental health aspect of a founder, which is really hard. And I think
Yeah. What kind of feedback
investors
have you
know
gotten from the
that.
market on that stuff? Have you gotten, has it all been positive? Have you gotten some negative feedback on it?
Honestly, it's been mainly positive. Like I can't say it's been negative. And I also think when we were raising our pre-seed round, I came into it not knowing what we were doing at all. And like not I had no idea what it meant to like raise a round or anything like that. And I think investors also appreciated my transparency and my honesty. And I don't really want an investor that like isn't gonna be willing to hear when things aren't going well or hear my struggles. So like I actually think it can weed people out if they are
Yeah.
upset at that content. So that's why I feel like more confident and more comfortable sharing it
I can
because I
see
am
that. It's a
confident.
good filtering function for investors who, I mean, once you get into the investor founder relationship, they're gonna see all the negative stuff anyway.
Hmm.
So yeah, filter out for the folks up front who maybe
Right.
are leaning into
And
the authenticity thing. Probably same thing for employees too, I imagine.
totally. Yeah. And I just want to create content that I wanted to see that could be a resource cuz like the best messages that I get are the ones that are like you've inspired me to start a business or you when I was in school and I was an engineering student there's not that many, female engineers so I would post a lot of content about that. And so many girls even to this day I've graduated college 5 years ago or it's going to be 6 years I think 5 or 6 years ago but I yeah, 6 years. So I graduated college 6 years ago, and I still to this day will get messages like, "You're the reason why I decided to go into engineering
That's awesome.
as a girl." And I'm like, "Wow, that's so nice," because I do think there should be more of us. And I think that's for so long people just like put women in a box of like, you can't do that. Maybe stick to marketing, like
Yeah.
you can't like become a founder. You can't go into STEM. And I'm like, why not? Like, I don't know. Like, to me, I've never felt that limitation. And so hopefully I can encourage other girls that they don't
Yeah.
have to feel that
We're all
either.
aiming, imitating creatures, and like we need heroes to look up to. We need people that we can sort of point to have charted the path. I
Exactly.
I've got a 16-month-old daughter, and I've been very frustrated recently looking for something very simple, like looking for picture books that have female hero characters, like shockingly hard. I
Yeah.
probably spent 3 hours the other night Googling, trying to find those.
That's crazy. That's like I don't have kids, so I don't know that even that side of it. But I remember when I was growing up, like I loved like the Judy B. Jones books, and I always gravitated towards like female leads
Sure.
um, in books and movies. And I think it's just because you want people that look like you. Like even with Barbies, like I was a big Barbie girl. Like I loved playing with dolls, and I always got wanted like the brunette ones, because that looked like me, or like Belle was my favorite princess because she looked like me. So
Sure.
it is important, I think, as a kid.
Yeah. Why why do you think more creators aren't building hard businesses and taking the path that you took?
I think one, because it is really hard. Like it's really hard to do. And I mean, even now, like I am not making money from Rella. I paid myself for a chunk of time and I stopped paying myself recently. My money still comes from content. And so I think like, dang, I could have never started Rella. And I could probably be making more money now because I would have spent more time investing on content.
Sure.
And what would I do with my time? I'm like, that's so much of my time would open up. Like, oh my gosh, like what would I be doing right now if I didn't start Rella? But at the same time, I know that I wouldn't have been fulfilled. And that's also the whole reason why I did want to start Rella.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's probably some like long-term payoff or delayed gratification, I imagine. I mean, presumably you build a great software business and you generate equity value, and then I don't know, maybe one day you sell it or you take it public.
I mean, yeah, to be clear, like this is not like a hobby for me. Like I definitely want to be acquired and make a lot of money off of this. Like
Yeah.
definitely that's the goal. That's why I wouldn't
But
be
to your
spending
point,
all this time
when you're a
if it wasn't
content
that.
creator, if you're generating all these short-term brand sponsorship dollars, it's probably really hard to give that up. It's
Hmm.
the bird, I guess the proverbial bird in the hand, worth
Right.
two in the bush situation. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that like short-term versus long-term trade-off being pretty tough to make.
Yeah. And like even I had a Patreon before I started Rella where I would share content creator tips. And I had like built a community of creators on there and I was making like decent money off of it. And I shut that down when I started Rella because I wanted to create educational content for Rella. And I was like, I can't charge people for the content I'm going to be giving away for free on Rella. I didn't know how to differentiate the two. So I was like, I'm just going to have to shut this down because I think that the payoff for Rella is going to be better in the end.
Yeah.
But I do still create content and I love it. And I never want to stop that because it's such a good creative outlet. It's again, opens so many doors. It brings people like no matter what business I start, I know I'm going to already have a built-in like distribution system. Like it's the best that decision I've ever made in my life. So like I never want to stop creating content.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's afforded you so many advantages, even with, even going through the SaaS experience. What,
Mhm.
what's your diagnosis? What happened in 2022 and 2023 in the creator economy? I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier that I think you sort of alluded to the hype cycle a bit.
Mhm.
Um, what was your experience building the business and going through it as a content creator yourself? And what's your diagnosis of what
Mhm.
happened?
Yeah. I mean, when I started Rella, I didn't know about the creator economy in the sense of like the word creator economy. I just wanted to solve this problem. But I think also people felt the problem more because during COVID, everyone was trying to be a creator. So it was like an explosion of people trying to be creators, an explosion of people blowing up. People started seeing how much money people were making. So I do think that COVID definitely helped with like putting creators more
So it
on the map.
accelerated it and yeah, propelled it forward.
Yes, definitely. But I didn't start Rella because I was like, oh, now it's a good time to start a creator business. Like I did not know what the term creator economy was because I wasn't really in the startup world. I wasn't in the VC world or anything like that. Um, so, but I do think a lot of people saw that and you said, oh my God, we should create, you know, apps and software for these creators, this new demographic of people because it's blowing up right now. But again, they didn't understand the nuances. They didn't understand what it actually was like to be a creator. And creators are also stingier. They're harder to get to purchase something
Sure.
or some creators don't necessarily need something super specific for them. So you have to be like, there actually has to be a problem there. It can't just be like parallel industries. Like you can't just say, oh, okay, there's, something that works in this industry. Let me just duplicate that, but put the word creator on it and it'll work for creators.
There's been some doom and gloom in the news cycle over the last 6 months or so. I assume you'd agree with that. There's been some negative messaging.
Totally.
What's Natalie's state of the creator economy
hmm
in February, March of 2024?
I think the companies that are actually solving problems are going to stick around and do really, really well. And I think that creators are becoming small business owners and business owners are having to become creators now. And so many people are becoming creators, even as a side hustle. Like it might not be their main thing, but they're doing it because they know the doors it opens, they know the opportunities there is. And so now there's more and more dollars going into these creators that maybe they don't consider themselves influencers, but at the end of the day, they are. Or people are becoming social media managers, they're becoming freelancers and they're creating content. I think content is like everything right now,
Yeah.
and that's just going to continue. And so I think there's going to be a lot of good businesses that come out of it that are trying to capture that market, which is creators that are earning revenue and becoming business owners, or vice
Mm.
versa, business owners that are becoming creators. Because that is where the money is. And there is so much money in it. And so many businesses are coming out of it that I think that the companies that are going to solve real problems are going to do well. And it's going to continue to grow.
What do you think about some of the Fortune 500 companies, the more old school legacy businesses? Like how are they going to fare? And the example that comes to mind immediately was the Gatorade Prime example. Gatorade's
hmm
been getting their butt kicked in the UK by KSI and Logan Paul's Prime. Um,
Yeah.
can they adapt fast enough to stay relevant?
People want relatability and people want to know who's behind these companies. So that's why I think like a company like Duolingo did really well because they made themselves become creators with the owl. Like the owl now is their influencer. And like it feels like it's like a small business because they're, making memes, they're going along with the trends. And so you want to be a part of it. With some company like Gatorade, I don't know who the founder of Gatorade is. Maybe that's common knowledge, but like I don't know who it
I
is.
couldn't
And
tell you
like,
either.
yeah, I don't know. They're probably owned by another, conglomerate that owns a bunch of different beverage companies. That's like, I don't really like feel any inclination to support them. But this new company, Prime, sounds cool. It's getting good reviews and it's by someone that I know and I've seen the process. Like, I'm going to support that instead. And I think more and more people are looking to support smaller businesses, even if they're not actually small, smaller businesses that feel like you have some connection to them because then you feel like you're a part of it. And so I
Yeah,
think
it's like a
that,
relatability and
yeah.
some aspect of like community. Uh, I mean, distribution is everything, right? Content is everything, and um, I can see the Prime and the Gatorade example to me is such an interesting one because Gatorade's such an old product with, in theory, really good brand affinity. Like everybody grew up
Mhm.
drinking it, most likely, and yet, oh, and by the way, they probably have big distribution advantages in theory. Like they're probably in a lot more stores than Prime, and yet Prime has driven a
Yeah.
pretty intense
It's,
wedge.
I always think with like makeup companies, if you go to Sephora, 10 years ago, it was all brands like big brands that, owned by these huge companies. You go to Sephora now, and Sephora is like the largest retailer for makeup. I think you can fact check me, but now it's all owned by influencers or celebrities, the biggest brands. So Rare Beauty, Selena Gomez. There's Fenty, which is Rihanna.
Mm,
There's I think there's Summer Fridays, which is Mariana Hewitt. There, Jisoo Hair Oil, which is Negan, another influencer. Like now, that's the top companies there, the top brands there, and it's owned by people that we see. Like we know who the founder is, we know who's behind it, and even if it's not the founder directly, someone on the team, like Tarte. We see the founder in not only these brand trips that she's doing, but like we see the founder at these trips and talking to the camera. And so we know who she is.
yeah,
And that is what is going to make brands successful, I think. And they have to embody being a creator. And that's actually what I was doing when I had my like freelancing / like agency before Rella. I was helping companies adopt more of a creator personality. So instead of feeling like it was these like small businesses and they were just posting their products on Instagram.
sure.
And it's like that's not going to do well anymore. You have to show your personality. So I was like helping the founders and as people on their team like kind of adopt creator personalities. And this was
Mm.
back in like 2019, 2020. So I think it's
I
only
do
gotten
wonder
bigger
how
then.
many, like what proportion of call it like legacy existing businesses are either going to adapt and figure out the content and the creator and the personality thing, or alternatively get disrupted by creators like you who build those harder, more durable businesses.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a story that's untold. I also wonder how much of it's just like a generational difference, maybe in like
Hmm.
consumer purchase behavior.
Yeah.
Um,
We've never had this distribution before, though. Like if you think of our parents' generation, they were told what to get based on commercials, which was only big companies. Like you weren't going to hear about a small business in a city 100 miles away from you because the distribution wasn't there and that person didn't have budget.
right.
But now the barrier to entry is so much lower because you can just post a TikTok and blow up. And so now do think that smaller, independent owned or creator led, celebrity led businesses are going to be more popular. Like, I think for my generation, even if we look at like tequila, 818 by Kendall Jenner, super popular now. Like I feel like it's one of the top grossing tequila companies for at least like my generation. Or if you look at, if we're going to use the Kardashians as an example, like Kim Kardashian with Skims is definitely
Sure.
disrupting Spanx. Like Spanx, even though Sarah Blakely is a founder that is well known, it's still more of an old school business model versus like getting into department stores and that was her
Yeah.
distribution versus Kim Kardashian has built-in distribution. She doesn't need that,
Direct to consumer. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's
And
dominant.
and that's more powerful now.
We like to wrap these conversations up with some very direct advice to our audience. And our audience is typically creators and creator COOs. What would be your advice to a creator who is successful creating content? They're making good money on the advertising side, whether it's programmatic or brand sponsorships, but they're starting to think about making that jump into building a business outside of content. What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, definitely take advantage of the platform you have. I think that, like we were talking about, that built-in distribution, the direct to consumer, like you have that right now. And so if there is something you want to start, I am a very impulsive person. Don't think that much about it. Just start testing it out. Like ask your customer or ask your audience if this is a problem that they face. Ask your audience if this is something they would, be interested in. Start building in public with your audience to make your audience feel connected to it. Because even if it doesn't go anywhere, let's say it doesn't work or, you end up, it's not a good business idea. You still have content that you've made from it. Your audience feels very connected to you and they trust you because you've shown them throughout the whole process. And then you're getting direct feedback in real time. Like we've never had to pay people to have focus groups and things like that. Like we're constantly getting feedback. We've, the biggest way people find us is through social media because of that distribution. We haven't spent money on marketing yet. And we've used my platform to my advantage. So use that. Don't let this opportunity go. And start creating content and talking to people and, getting feedback for your idea.
Yeah, I love that. So just to summarize, get the product, be a little impulsive and just do it. Get the product into the market, start getting feedback, build in public around it. And then there's probably a relatively high chance of failure. That's how startups go. And so, hey, if you failed, you learned a bunch, you did those 3 things and you've got some great content. Probably built some trust with your fan base, and then you can always try it again.
Exactly. Yep.
I love that. Well, thanks for taking the time, Natalie.
Thanks for having me. This was amazing. I love talking about this. I can talk about this for hours. So thanks for having me on.
I had a blast. I hope we have another conversation soon, and I'd love to check in the future and hear how everything's going with Rella over time.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creator COO. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Also, please consider giving us a rating and a review, as this helps other creators and creator COOs like you to find the podcast. This episode was produced by Rebecca Donovan at Uscreen. It was edited by Richard Middleton at Longwave Digital, with artwork designed by Spencer Marsh. I'm Matt Estes, and you've been listening to The Creator COO. See you next time.